I am so happy to be back. Happy New Year 2021, everybody. We have got a really great guest today, and I know I'm going to learn a lot, and you will too. Today's guest is an educator after my own heart. He creates engaging experiences for educators and young learners through personalized learning and technology integration. He's an ed tech specialist with Kennesaw University, woohoo, Georgia School, an Apple teacher, certified Google innovator. And side note, I think we're going to have a sweet connection here of a little history between Marcus Borders and one of our TPR gurus. He was slated as Letitia's lead mentor teacher back in the day. So I can't wait to hear more about our guest, Marcus Borders.
Yay!
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hey.
I am so excited that we're starting the year off with Marcus. I have been trying to work with him forever and a day. But in all honesty, guys, you are in for a treat. When I tell you an educator that knows his craft, operates in excellence. Not only is he brilliant, but he's also a student, which I absolutely love. His patience is amazing, along with his voice. And so when I was slated to start our student teacher program from the ground up, I needed someone to walk alongside of me, to support me, supporting our mentor teachers. And I just had to have Marcus, because I just felt that, his expertise, his knowing of the craft, his really ability to have those difficult conversations, but in a very affirming way. I just felt that that's what our teachers needed. And so I was doing everything I could to get the money and the budget together to bring him on board. And then he leaves me. I was so sad, but it's really been a treat to see his career evolve and the greatness that's come about and the great things that are coming. So I'm really excited that he's here with us tonight.
Thank you, Letitia.
And Marcus, that was pretty good. I think we're done with the show. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Oh, mic drop. That's it.
Right.
Marcus, you sound like an educator's educator to me, and you also sound like a lifelong learner. Would you describe yourself as a lifelong learner?
Most definitely. I was the quiet kid in class that I wouldn't say I was an avid or heavy reader, but I soaked up a lot of things, and that has transferred into my adult life. The work that I do right now, it keeps me relevant, and I love that I can encourage and push teachers along to kind of get out of, though, and Letitia knows this, I am learning to push myself out of my own comfort zone. I work to try to do that with educators because this field is ever changing. So yes, I'm a lifelong learner.
I love that. And so that also kind of fits in, I think, where you seem to be a proponent for personalized learning. Would you say that that's a big part of what you have a passion for, is personalized learning with the integration of technology, which we'll get into next?
Absolutely. My former director, shout out to Stephanie Stevens with my department. I teach at Kennesaw State. She led a lot of the work with personalized learning in the state of Georgia. And so to go back, to piggyback on our source spot with Letitia, my transition from the district that I was with to Kennesaw State University was centered around personalized learning and the idea that technology, little side note, technology is not fully necessary for personalized learning. So that's the key thing. Though I am in technology, I understand that technology, though I have two laptops right in front of me, 2 phones, all of that stuff, I know that it's not the end all be all. However, I'm passionate about supporting schools and teachers in creating those experiences to where it's dependent on where their furniture is set up, what technology they may have access to, but ultimately how they use those items to inform their instruction. So I think that's the magic and the gooey stuff behind it that allows teachers to still be teachers, but it can elevate how we accommodate students and achievement.
I love that. Can you define personalized learning in just kind of like a high overview, just in case some of our listeners out there maybe aren't quite sure what that means, or they might use another term for it?
Absolutely. So, and to back up, Letitia noted this, that I am currently a student. I am a doctoral student, so I'm putting on a little bit of my research hat from my first semester. So let's clarify. There's no dissertation. Thank you. There's no dissertation or anything that has started. I'm entering January 11th. I'll be entering my second semester of coursework.
Hey, congratulations, though.
Exactly.
That's
Don't
awesome.
you know how I feel about celebration? Let's not gloss over that.
Exactly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I think we just raised like major points just by having him say that.
I think our first episode's, for the year is going off wonderfully.
I mean,
I love it.
That's
Pete?
it.
Okay.
I love it. But I brought that up. That was, not to, brush my shoulders off or anything like that, but more so the research that I've did last semester reminded me that oftentimes in education, we look at personalized learning succinctly as differentiation, and that is not the case. So I just wanted to clarify that because when I was thinking about this conversation, I wanted to say that it was, but I had to remind myself that no, personalized learning is not centered around differentiation. There's a lot of research out there and a lot of debunking of that going on so that there is not a clear, distinct definition of personalized learning. But here's what it is comprised of. As I mentioned, it's the experiences that teachers are creating for students that accommodates what they're trying to cover at the time. So it could be a math skill, a social content within social studies, an ELA concept that's trying to be covered. Would this work better where students are working one individually, where they're able to take the content that the teacher has created ahead of time, such as a PowerPoint presentation, uploading things to Google Classroom, depending on what they use, and have they modeled for the kids or the students how to navigate that content at their own pace. There's an awareness of data, which lends itself to differentiation, because if a student scores along a certain scale, that should indicate whether they should be remediated in the content, either with technology, a video, or a teacher, or even a classmate, or if they're able to excel forward to the next unit or develop some sort of project or artifact or paper that showcases mastery of that concept. So while personalized learning doesn't mean that students are in small group instruction and the teacher puts centers in place and they rotate them out, there are little tidbits of that. Losing my train of thought a bit, but I just wanted to make it clear that differentiation is a small part of it, but not a new, personalized learning isn't a new aged version of differentiation.
Glad you provided that clarity. I mean, I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I do remember when these terms were floating out there, especially the integration of technology, and it was just so overwhelming. And we just heard over and over again, teachers really feeling anxious about the technology and feeling like they were being replaced.
Yes.
Somehow it just started to create this buzz that I am now being replaced. And so I love that you're kind of debunking some things early on in our conversation, and hopefully some of our listeners can exhale, because I know that that's still sometimes the common reaction, if you will.
Absolutely. A lot of it often ties to, and I don't want to harp on this in our conversation, but it really is contingent upon how the district and the school, as far as administratively, how they leverage it, because if they have a misunderstanding of it to a teacher that may have a better understanding, that clashes.
Yes.
So if the school is promoting, hey, a lot of the rhetoric tends to be, you guys are doing all of this already, we're just putting a new term on it, and that confuses teachers.
Yes.
So while an effective teacher that's been teaching, insert something 30 plus years, and they've been teaching, I jokingly say you've been teaching like it's 1985 still. And they may have, been the king or queen of centers in 1985, and they're hearing that, oh, Miss Johnson, hopefully there's no Miss Johnson on this call. Your centers lend itself very well to personalized learning. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, that's confusing, Miss Johnson. So we want to make sure that we're clear about that there is a paradigm shift that's happening right now, where we have to get out of our comfort zones. We can take what we know from our from college experiences and from our experiences as a teacher to embed into this, but we need to change what we've been doing.
Yeah, that you make a great point, because technology today also gives a different implication, right? So when we talk about personalization, we do automatically think, oh, it's got to be tech related because it's using AI, or it's using some kind of, CMS, LMS, whatever, content management system, learning management system that's observing the students learning, and it's placing in front of them certain things and certain learning modules. But it kind of goes back to a saying that I like to stick by, and that's technology doesn't solve problems, people solve problems. And really learning centers, or not learning centers, but the personalized, is still that humanistic approach that, using non-tech solutions to kind of make the experience more focused on the student, right? I mean, it feels,
Definitely.
that is a great message. That does have to keep being said over and over again. Otherwise, people will look at it as the hula hoop, and they'll say, oh, it's another fad, it's another term. It's
Right.
another.
And this is here to stay. And one thing that I, as you were speaking, Fred, is I'm glad I didn't mention this. What I'm seeing in the district that I support, as within my role, I still support a school district as an instructional technology coach. They're very heavy on adaptive software. So those are the gamified websites, are the websites that have a lot of videos on there and maybe questions afterwards. And based on how that student answers a question, it'll either take them back, keep them where they are, or progress them. And schools are promoting this as you're doing personalized learning because you're looking at this data, all day, and you're making sure the kids are on there for 40 minutes a week or something to that effect. And
Right.
that is personalized learning. I want to debunk that can be a small assessment, and data is definitely a part of personalized learning. That is a key component of guiding instruction. However, we need to be able to juggle a lot of different resources and tools to make sure that it's happening appropriately.
Nice.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus, again, because I'm a little far removed from what's happening day to day. But I think sometimes the way they try to sell it to us, admin, is because people don't really know how to have conversations and really how to sell something. I feel like teachers are so bombarded, and I certainly hope that we get into how teachers can manage or even pick some top strategies. But there's so much on our plate. Educators have so much on their plates. I kind of feel like this, you're already doing it. It just looks different. Is their way of really adding more and trying to trick us with you're already doing it?
Absolutely.
And I just really want and hope that we can start shifting to more honest and authentic conversations, because at the end of the day, whether we're using technology to instruct or a teacher-based, curriculum, let's just be honest, because the kids suffer in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
clash that you talk about is real.
And I two particular environments that I support are like night and day. And these are in urban settings in South Fulton County in Atlanta. And so I know these demographics. So to see one school that's highly motivated between their administrative team and their teachers, meaning, just as an example, January 4th was the first day of school for a lot of teachers. And to see their smiling faces, cameras on, beaming and ready to learn something
Wow.
in professional learning training is powerful to me. I've seen an environment where it's aggressive and it's a lot of work, but the same energy that is expected of the teachers comes from the principal down to our curriculum support teachers, down to the coaches that are in the building. So they're eager and they understand, whereas other environments are having that clash where they're trying to pacify the teachers, where they may not be able to fully articulate at an administrative level these changes that take place, or they're not willing, or they don't know how to have those conversations, to where some teachers, this is kind of harsh. Maybe the school doesn't need to say this, but I'll say this. A lot of our teachers have been teaching since 1975 and have been teaching since the same way. It's time for them to retire or find another passion.
Blasphemy. No, you're
right. It's time to go, buddy.
Change and grow. To soften that a little bit, if they just don't feel they have the capacity to handle what's necessary to teach in a classroom effectively in 2021. We may get to this later, but with everything, with how 2020 went for a lot of us, we are in a paradigm shift of education within education. So that's I'm worried but interested in seeing what the attrition rates will look like for teachers at the end of this school year, because has pushed a lot of people to find something else.
Hey, yes. I'm a recruiter. I'm interested in those numbers too.
No, we're seeing that. Tough. We're already hearing that anecdotally in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
It kind of.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry,
Aaron. Go ahead, honey.
That's okay. I think it kind of goes back again to where I said to Marcus, I've noticed, or it sounds like you're a lifelong learner. And I think that's just kind of what we're talking about, is that I think in any profession, not just in teaching or in education, but we should try to have that mindset of being a lifelong learner. If we just remain static, or at least for me, I'll speak for myself, I get bored, I get antsy. I like to feel challenged. I like to feel like I'm growing. Sometimes I'm growing in ways that I don't want to grow and learning things I don't necessarily wanted to learn, but that's okay. It's still just keeping that brain going and trying to constantly improve my craft.
Absolutely.
And to the I should come to the defense of the 1975 teacher, because I think, you mentioned the excitement about staff development or professional development this week. How much of that is the teacher and how much of that is them not receiving really relevant training, along their careers, right? Like, I'm sure that probably at some point in education, that was okay. But how do we help our teachers to pivot and kind of, soften the blow of the paradigm shift and then give them the support that's needed so that they can evolve and grow? I mean, it's the same strategy we have with our kids, right? Our kids don't always want to engage what we're trying to teach them. It's our responsibility to create an environment where we kind of entice them into that learning.
Right.
So I think some of that is the lack of professional support, growth, and resources that they've gotten along the way or not gotten along the way.
Just experiences, because the reason I brought that example up is because I am 5 years removed from the classroom. I love this role because I'm still able to work with teachers and students. A little side note, the teachers that I work with, I tell them, please schedule me to work with your kids because I miss hearing the kids. I miss it badly. But speaking to that school that was eager this week, one of the greatest things that the admin team did is they were not just consulting me, being that I was a part of that meeting, I was consulted, but overall, they really test the waters of where their teachers are. It's school culture. That's a part of their culture, their narrative to why I believe that happened. It was maybe a 90-minute meeting, an hour to 90 minutes where we met with them, different grade levels between Monday and Tuesday, and across the board, their morale was pretty high. And it's because there's a fine balance of, are you wasting my time with fluff? Are you wasting my time and overwhelming me?
Right.
Or are you trying to toe the line
Right.
with being meaningful? And it's hard for me to make sure that my information is not overwhelming yet informative, but the person the administrator that I was working with made it relevant for the teachers and where they were and what they were covering. And I was able to input my piece there. So long story short is, I think just being able to know as teachers, we know our students and we need to know them from top to bottom. Your administrative team needs to know as staff and what they're capable of and how to push them. And I think that's what worked well at this particular school.
It's in a weird way, it's personalized learning.
Right.
And that's such a great issue because at the higher ed level, right, we have the instructional designers, right? And they are there to be, they're you, right? They are the person who's ushering the technology. And it's never really kind of filtered in that way. It's like, hey, show up for this training. And people of all different levels, from my level, I'm not saying I'm the master, but I'm on a different level because I'm a tech background. And then you have someone maybe from the liberal arts, they're coming in. And that's what ends up happening. It's resistance or acceptance or adoption, right? And then it's that unevenness. And then from the student's perspective, back to Letitia's point, the students really do suffer because they'll experience something in one class totally different than somebody else in another class. And that's in the higher ed level. I would imagine it also occurs at the K through 12 level. So for example, a faculty member will learn about using a feature in the LMS. They'll go to another class and they're using pens and papers, and it's a totally uneven experience. And the student, I think they interpret that as quality. And also they're wondering if they're really learning where they need to be learning in terms of what the corporate America is expecting. So that's at that other level, but it is an interesting challenge that you all have to deliver technology education to educators.
And my background is in elementary. I was an elementary educator. I taught second, third, and fourth grade, and I currently coach within elementary schools. So I'm always coming from that perspective of being able to support how to support the babies, as I'll say. With the teachers, it was important that they understood the different barriers of how to transfer that that information to their students at that level, so that they will be capable of taking it from one spot to the next. As an example, for me, it's funny that you brought that up, Fred. When I was teaching, especially third grade, I often had students who would go to fourth grade and their parents would say, I hope that Miss such and such or Mr. such and such does what you did in their class. And I would just, not trying to create any type of opposition with my colleagues, but I would say, hey, if you like using Google Classroom or Nearpod or insert whatever tool it may be, just ask if they could use it. And in some instances it worked for that next teacher. In some instances it did not. So it transferred in different ways, but there was often, like you mentioned, that disparity to where the quality of education or just what was happening in another classroom was not the same.
Right, which is another passion of yours, Marcus. We didn't mention this in the opening, but you're very passionate about equity in education and technology. And so, I hope that we can broaden the lens of this idea of equity, because I even think that a teacher's readiness and their ability to deliver that kind of instruction is also equity. And I know that we don't normally look at it that way, but if they get teacher A in third grade, and he or she is a rock star and the technology is just robust, and then they go to the next grade, to your point, and it's teacher B, and they're in 1975, that really becomes an equity issue.
Yes.
So it's even deeper and bigger than age of the teacher, how long they've been teaching. So if you would just maybe touch a little bit about, the coronavirus has really impacted us in so many ways. If you would share with us a little bit about how that equity has impacted technology use in our kids.
Well, in a good sense, it has amplified it tremendously. A joke that I've used with a lot of my teachers is and again, me speaking to you all right now makes me feel as though I'm harsh with my teachers, but I don't think I am. So I'll say you have no choice but to use it now. So in the positive sense, I think across the board, it has been amplified tremendously. However, in terms of the how that's taken place, that's where the disparities come into place. I am fortunate to support a district that created space where all students were able to receive devices. And in some instances, a lot of companies or the schools created resources or spaces to where if internet access was an issue outside of school, they provided that for them, or at least got them in contact with that company or that entity that could support them with that. But there are a lot of schools that are districts that are not building, that still are struggling with that. To the point of the teachers, or more so, I'll actually dig into my greatest passion in terms of equity and technology, and that's the parents. I feel, and I am not a parent, but I don't know if you guys on the call are parents, and I see some facial expressions changing right now. So I can only imagine what the last 9 or so months have been like for students having to work in different capacities of either being face-to-face, being hybrid, or being in school. And most parents, let me not generalize, there are a lot of parents who do not understand the ramifications of technology, be it as simple as how to operate a computer for technology and not just internet, searches, the same phones, iPads, and tablets. I think we're in an age where most families know that that is needed, so they may go out and buy it and provide it, but do they know how to effectively leverage it? So in terms of equity, I think that it's time that parents are provided with specific trainings that allow them to know how to effectively and safely support their kids on how to safely use those tools at home, be it on how to create a project. The joke that I use is to eradicate grandma's book report, where we would send the kids to grandma over the summer and all she knew how to do was take them to the library, some books, and have them, she tossed some notebook paper to them and said, hey, I need you to write about this chapter today. While that's good and effective, maybe Johnny can create a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe he can make a movie in iMovie. Maybe he can do some sort of virtual or AR experience that can showcase his understanding of that fact that he did his research on. So for me, that is an area that I'm actually interested in doing for my doctoral research, is around parents and technology, because I feel that will even the playing field as to the teachers have no choice. contingent upon their level of efficacy and what they know how to do. They're required to use technology now in different capacities, which means the students will be in different capacities. But where it falls short is depending on how long we have these different variations of how we're learning due to the pandemic, you're going to have kids in different spaces at home, at grandma's house, with their parents at work because they have no choice but to be there. And the parents need to be able to quickly judge and assess and be able to troubleshoot the technology and not just say we're done for the day. So.
All of our parents out there, if we have parents, I'm sure they're like shaking their heads. And now I have to be IT support.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's part of it, right?
That's huge. I mean, there's such a big nugget there in one regards because, so I teach technology. I'm teaching the coders, the college level coders, programmers, technologists. And, you know, I see a lot of kids come in, especially as freshmen. And it kind of reminds me of something I used to say when we used to have landline phones. Just because you can use a phone doesn't make you a telecommunication engineer.
Wow.
And so now what's interesting to me is how technology isn't completely seamless yet. There is that barrier that still exists. And it is real. You said, like you said, with support at the home. And I kind of wonder, like, at what point will we ever get to that point where the technology just happens and the learning could just flow? Because if you don't know how to do iMovie, or you can't open up PowerPoint, or you can't do some of those low-level I should say some of those skills, the learning never takes place. Right. And yet they all get consumed by it. And so one of the first things we teach in programming is you got to get comfortable with the tool. Now let's create the algorithm, write the code, and so on. And it feels like those kids, if they're awash in all of the tech and the parents are awash in all the tech, we're creating a massive ripple that's going to impact us for longer learning, or the ability to learn. What am I trying to say? To be able to learn as you get older. They may not want to, but I think the tech is getting easier to use, but still that's a big challenge that you just laid out there.
Yeah. And I even think that, kind of going back to debunking the conversation around personalized learning and how it's not differentiation, you brought up a point of teaching the tool. I think in conversations as a technology coach, we're often pushed to not walk into a classroom or an environment saying, hey, here is how you log onto Nearpod. But the practitioner in me, the teacher in me, and I guess just maybe even how the learner in me, how I am as a learner, I want to know how to do A, B, C, D, E, F first. And then I want to make that connection to how I can use it in the classroom. So I think that's an important conversation to always have, is we need to get over that hurdle of, okay, what's the how part? Tell me what this is, what does it do, and how do I do it? And I encourage my teachers to do that. Please take time out of the day. We can put the standard aside for 5, maybe 10 minutes to explain how we want the kids to use this tool, because when it's time for them to use it, then we can just push them in there. I think there's often this ambiguous assumption of, oh, the kids, they were born with technology in their hands. They know what to do. Right. But yet, not you.
Not me.
I'll say teacher A, she's bumping her head against the wall because she's made this fabulous lesson that requires the kids to make whatever it is, but they don't know what to do, or they're asking her or bombarding her with a million questions, or the parents are doing the same. That's because teacher A did not take the time to simply explain the how-to part. Yeah. And I think that's an important piece of that, and also creating awareness across the board. Be it for teachers and environments that may not be promoting technology or certain resources heavily, and for parents. You know, I think across the board, parents may know about Class Dojo because
most behavior.
Right. Most schools are communicating about that, but do they know about Flipgrid, or do they know about Nearpod in different ways? If someone, said that out in a conversation, would they know what that was?
So I know this conversation has been super rich. I want to just stop and pause just to make the point, because I want our listeners to pick up on these things. Culture and climate matters. Yes. So if you are in a school building where culture and climate and making sure that your learning as an educator is not being fostered, that causes a lot of stress and anxiety for folks. So I just want to make the point that, teachers tend to own everything. You need an environment where culture and climate is important, is the focus. Do you have anything for folks to navigate those types of environments for their own well-being and personal growth?
So, and I guess it's kind of segued into something that I was going to bring up. No, it wasn't over the summer. I want to say it was back in April of last year, once we began to kind of settle into, our new situation. I did a podcast with a friend of mine, Sheldon Eakins, Dr. Sheldon Eakins. He has a leading equity center that he operates. And within that podcast, we had a similar conversation to this, where it was equity and access and technology. And he turned that into a course for free for teachers. In that conversation, we went through basic steps on how to teachers who may not be experienced, who may not have that capacity within their schools to support them, on where they can start in that. And this is not promotion or anything like that. Like I said, it's free, but it was just a very succinct conversation in the way that he broke it down. And we talk about certain apps, websites, and tools, and how to familiarize yourself with that. Excellent. Certain conversations you should have with your students and your parents, being some things that I kind of noted when I was preparing for tonight. Teachers need to be okay with failing with technology in front of their kids, and being okay with not being perfectionist, or acknowledging if something goes on. Like when we started our conversation, I made a mention of my microphone. A lot of people, if they realized their microphone went out, they would lose it. But are just any little hiccup that happens, if that PowerPoint didn't load correctly, if that video doesn't play, being able to pivot or take a moment and say, hey, let's take 1 minute and let Mr. Borders figure this out, and we'll come back, or we'll move on to point B. Students and even parents seeing that, it creates the understanding that, hey, technology is not perfect. I think, Fred, you mentioned that technology is still changing, and understanding that you have to not have a formal plan B and C, but be able to just continue on our pivot as necessary. So if you want, I can share the link to that podcast, where listeners can go through that and actually kind of get some of that information, because I talk about understanding the basics of creating your own awareness and different resources they can use there.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm sitting here thinking too about some layers of support for teachers and parents before we move too far from that. And then I'd love to, Marcus, hear some things that you could recommend to us, some quick tips to provide reasonable IT support for students, since they're at various levels too in our classroom. But real quickly, I'm sitting here thinking about, for teachers and parents, when you provide different layers of support, because everyone, again, this goes back to that personalized learning. For myself, you send me some instructions or even a video on how to use something, I'm going to look at that on my own, and I'm going to play around and teach myself. That doesn't work for everyone, but that works for me. So you can provide, and they're free. All you have to do is search them on the internet, right? There's some really great video lessons where they'll literally walk you step by step how to do something. Or you can also print off or email a PDF. These are things that we can provide to our colleagues if they're struggling with something, to see if we can help them to learn it themselves, to our parents, to our students. And then also, don't be afraid to have your students be helpers, not just for you, right? But one of my favorite things to do when I was really focusing on personalized learning was, we're working on something. I use Sway a lot, Marcus, in Microsoft Office, so that it creates almost like a website type presentation. And it's not as user friendly as I'd love it to be, but once you start playing around with it, you can kind of get a better feel for it. And I would start to notice the kids and what things they were really getting good at with Sway. And I would start making them the helpers and made announcements about it, right? Hey, if you really need help in videos, here's your people in the classroom today that will be more than happy to help you. Because there's something about, Marcus, when a student shows another student how to do something versus the teacher. For some reason, my language sometimes, or my way of expressing, shocking, right? Of how to do something didn't register with them. I think my voice was like the peanuts, the wah, wah, wah. But if their peer sitting next to them explained it or showed them, or even said, well, did you watch the video she sent you? Right? All of a sudden, a light bulb would go off, and I'm like, awesome. We're working together. We're sharing together. We're learning together, right? So it doesn't have to cost anything to support each other. We just need to start using each other to do that.
And that's empowerment. I had that in some of the notes that I took on building equity across, for your students is, especially as they get older. I've seen it done in kindergarten. I've seen it done with fifth graders, and definitely up, into the ranks of education. But that's empowering, and it can be a bit passive too. If I've trained you as the teacher in the beginning, overall, I can sit back and say, okay, Marcus, I taught you this. You teach the class now, and I can take a breather for a few minutes while I can trust that Marcus knows what to do with that. So that's absolutely correct. And I've even had some experiences with my parents years ago when I was teaching, to where I've had them support a few other parents in my classroom on how to do different things. So absolutely.
I love it. And by the way, students listening, back in my day, so this is an opportunity for you our entrepreneurs to create their own job. I would get hired out by my neighbors and my parents' friends, $25 an hour. And sometimes it was just because they didn't even know how to turn on this thing. So it was either just to go and teach the basics, or it was to set up their computer and plug in the printer. $25 an hour back then. That was pretty great.
That's right. It's great now.
But that is a great activity for anybody that's listening, if they want to, have their student groups engage in that, especially being in remote mode right now, because there's still a lot. You talk about equity. There's such an unevenness right now, no matter where you are in the country, but yeah, you could launch a group into that. You could have them learn consulting skills, and communication skills and listening skill, all that stuff, right? It's all good stuff.
And that's one of the
Go
other
ahead, Marcus. I'm sorry.
Is you guys mentioned how I think, Aaron, you said how you're good with a video and a set of directions to kind of learn something, and you're intrinsically motivated to research that. But I'll just use you, Fred, since you're on the screen. I say Fred may not. Fred is in IT, but he doesn't like to learn technology. Fred may work better with me sitting side by side with him, or with COVID in mind, maybe virtually with us walking step by step. That's another part of my research, is what works better for parents. Do I come to your house? Of course, pandemic aside, do I come to your house and guide you through this? Or are you better with me just shooting you a few videos on how to do you just need to kind of be walked to the resource, or do you need to be walked through the resource? All right,
real quick though, are you seeing anything? You just cited two examples. Are you seeing anything really novel happening as far as that kind of training? I call it training.
Right now, I've only seen it at a school level. Even within my research, it's typically either the researcher conducting the research who does that sort of training for parents specifically, or it's at a school level. And I've had experience with that at the top of this school year in August. It was trying to think, did I do it with both schools? I think I did it with just one, to where I actually met with one of the parent groups in the afternoon and walked them through how to use Microsoft, because the district that I support, they adopted Office 365. So this is teaching them about Teams and kind of how the school would disseminate information for them. So at the school level, yes, but more in a more organic way, outside of teachers working with their parents, not yet.
Okay.
I mean, this is a whole consulting firm right here. I mean, if you really think it, I've just been mustering and just thinking about education can often be so reactive as opposed to proactive. I mean, in my opinion, every kid should have had a device prior to COVID. Everyone should have had a device prior to COVID, but I'm very concerned about post-COVID. Yeah. How are those gaps going to be filled? And you bring such a great point about the parent piece, that support, in order for our kids to close that gap, parents have got to get put up to speed. It reminds me of Ron Clark Academy. And I've spent the whole day there, and it's an amazing place. And I remember him sharing that they have that parent academy where at the top of every unit, math unit, or particularly math, they would invite the parents in for Saturday, and they would basically teach parents like an overview. This is what your kids are going to be doing in this math unit. And they were literally teaching parents the math.
Yeah.
Which impacts the kids. So I think that same strategy can certainly be used in technology.
Absolutely.
I forgot, I think because I've been in such a fog since COVID started, but the very beginning, Marcus, same for our district, it's all Microsoft oriented. So Microsoft Teams, a lot of people weren't familiar with that. And then my a lot of the groups that I deal with are various stakeholders in the community. So the principals, teachers, students, parents, community members, they all meet, and we were having to meet on Teams live event because it was part of a government entity, and a live event is a whole nother beast. It was well, it was something. I've got stories. I don't need to, I don't need to scare you all about it now. But I made on our social media feed, I started creating graphics just saying holding office hours. Yes. And I would just hang out in regular Teams, which that is more like a Zoom or a Skype. And I would hang out and just wait for people to show up and then show them how to do a live event, right? It was kind of like a live office hours, just kind of hanging out for support. And what was nice about it is I would just kind of take an hour here one week or an hour there at another time, in the week. And that way people, if they needed help, they could just come to me and I'd be available for them during that window, right?
I like that. I like that approach.
But live event, guys, whew.
You become, so I've had 2 instances with that, and you become a producer. I did at the top of the school year with that actual parent meeting that I mentioned was a live event. I had no idea what it was doing, what I was doing. Thankfully, I was not running it. I was just contributing to the conversation. However, in November, I had to support other teachers. I think Letitia may know what I'm talking about. I had to support other teachers within the district on there was a celebration happening. And so I had to be behind the scenes, and you're literally telling screen 1 to go to screen 2, upload this information, cue this. Hey, is your mic ready? And it's like this 15 to 30 second delay. It's a lot, but once you understand it, it's not that bad.
Right.
Marcus, I might have to send you. So now every time when they're about to have a meeting, the night before, I'll send an email, and I have this frequently asked questions, because it just got to the point where it was like, no, you can't dial in with your phone. No, you know what I mean? Like you have to use your district email address. I mean, it was just like the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you this thing I ended up creating that was just automatic pre-troubleshooting, because I knew that those were what they're. Then I would sit here, and as we're trying to get the meeting to go live, I'm sitting here with my phone I sound like an infomercial, and I kept, because once you go live, anyone who joins can hear you. It's broadcast. And I'm like, here's my phone number. If you need help, please give me your phone. And I would put it on mute, and you'd see me here doing IT behind. Then I get that person on, I hang up, phone would ring. Hold on, let me get this other person. I mean, it was comical to say the least, but this is what we got to be doing right now. Fred keeps saying COVID, this pandemic has created things that were going to happen probably 5 years from now anyways. So we're getting some of us a crash course in some of this stuff that I think is going to stay, or I hope in the future, if it is really truly best practice in helping us to meet our kids in this century, right?
This century.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Marcus.
Pete, go ahead.
Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
I was going to make a joke, but it's going to age me. I'm hoping Microsoft will maybe bring back the little paperclip guy. Do you remember that? Who would pop up and help you? Wouldn't that be amazing? Can we start
bring back the paperclip?
Bring them back. Bring them back.
I think that ate more resources than the actual operating system did. So
I was just wondering, Marcus, let's say tomorrow they said, hey, you're back in the classroom. You are there in the classroom, 2021, in this situation, elementary school. You brought your toolbox along, some of your favorite products, resources, programs, apps. What would be some of the things that you say, I just can't live without that right now? I'm teaching hybrid. I'm a music teacher. I got 600 students. I just saw the kids that I saw today, I'll see them twice this week. I didn't see them. I haven't seen them for 8 weeks. And after this, I don't see them again for 6 weeks. And yet we're still expected to give them grades. And all I want to do is spark some creativity and love of music in them in that 40 minutes. What would you, if you were back in the classroom, what would be some of your toolbox things? Say, I love this. This is what I'm going to do to help me get through this day and get on the right track.
So at the foundation of this, for me, it is having an LMS or a CMS. I'm sure at this point, most districts have adopted something between Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, or Microsoft Teams. In some capacity, there should be a space for me as the teacher to upload content, resources, assignments, assessments, and some sort of data component behind that. And resources, if I didn't mention that, so that the students and the parents can always have access to things. Within those LMSs or CMSs, and that's learning management system or content management system, there's the ability for the students to communicate with you as well as the parents. And so there's a shift that I would have to make sure that I was maintaining of being available. What I've noticed when I was actually teaching is that at, let's say, 4 o'clock, if I hadn't heard, and I'm saying I as a euphemism, if I hadn't heard from that parent or that student by then, I wouldn't hear from them. You wouldn't hear from me until 8 o'clock the next day. Now, while I don't want to necessarily talk to a parent at 11:45 at night, the casual connectivity that we have with our devices, I think we should open that up to, answering quick questions for students and parents throughout the day. So long as we have the capacity and space to do that and it's not overwhelming for us, I think we should be able to leverage it that way. So that's one. As far as engagement, and it depends on the age of the kids, I think Nearpod, Seesaw, and Flipgrid are fantastic tools for creating engaging spaces. So this is where it's a mix of you finding lessons or digital presentations for students. It has VR in it. It has, does it have AR in it yet? I don't think Nearpod has augmented reality just yet, but it has assessments in there. Or the teachers can take those good old PowerPoints they've been using and add a little bit of engagement in there. So especially at the upper level, the kids aren't just listening to lectures all day long. They're being asked questions. They're being provided with websites, resources, and the teacher gets data along the way of that as well. Seesaw is sort of like Nearpod, but for me, it can be used at the higher level, but I like it for the babies at the K-5 level. And all of these tools create spaces to where students can respond in different ways. So and I'm thinking of this as I'm talking, this brings equity back into the conversation. A lot of our scholars are in environments that are not always the most positive spaces or that accommodate learning as well as they could. So if the teacher is asking the student to respond to maybe the whole class to respond verbally to something or to use their audio, but that child has friends, family members, babies that are being noisy in the background, and that could be embarrassing for them, they can have them type their response instead. So I would also make sure that I hone in on my ability to provide options for students also. Last two must-haves is some sort of a screen recording tool. My favorite is Screencastify. And that's because I would want to create personalized tutorials for my kids. Sure, I could I'll add this one in vocabulary as for videos or even Nearpod presentations, but I feel I'm in this position as the teacher because my kids listen to me and I am qualified as an educator to share this skill or this content. So why not do a 5-minute video where I'm explaining it in my way? And also it eliminates parents asking me, I don't know how to teach this skill because I can shoot them that video and they can pause it, rewind it, and watch it as many times as they want to. And last but not least, I think it's important as an educator to understand cloud services. And Fred, you might know this being IT. If I showed you guys my desktop right now, it will be clean. But if I go to Teacher A's desktop, she has files going across her computer. She wonders why her computer doesn't want to stay on for more than 5 minutes. So understanding cloud services and how that can save your life, how and teaching your students how to use those tools, especially if you're a Google district or a Microsoft district, and how it sort of simplifies the I lost my homework mantra, so to speak, because you have everything saved there for you. So
I'm gonna need for you not to tell my business about that desktop.
The cloud concept, though, that is a big one. There's a differentiation between the way we all learn to save files and the way the generations that are coming up behind us save files. So when you ask them to save something or submit something, there is a difference. And I think most teachers should be aware of that. But I know that's something that I have to always create a bridge whenever I begin teaching my students, because they do have a different understanding of how to submit something. It's mind-blowing experience. But it's a stressor, and if you can't get the work to the students, or the students can't get the work to the teacher, it's very frustrating. Yeah,
but I'm seeing the shift a little bit. But overall, I think those 5 or 6 things, I feel like I maybe named 12 actually. To Pete, those are kind of my go-to items that I would have to have in my bag in 2021 walking into a classroom.
Excellent.
And if
I've
you
been-
could, you know, we do some blogging. We do actually have a blog, so maybe you can share those tools with us again, and we'll make sure that we get our listeners that tool bag, because you know it's just so much out there that I think, you know, to minimize stress, it's just good to have the go-tos. Erin, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I was just thinking, and it may not be a fair question, but before we kind of start tying up the conversation, because we want to be respectful of your time, Marcus, but I was sitting here thinking, how can teachers support students with disabilities who needs, you know, specialized instruction, related services, and other kind of support? Do you have any kind of little tricks in your
So
bag?
I try to tread that conversation very lightly, as I am not a special needs educator, and I haven't seen the most favorable methods used so far, specifically with the teachers who provide those services. I haven't quite found the accommodations that I think would make the most sense, but I do have resources depending on that exceptionality or however that student may be best served. So I'm thinking in terms of kind of going back to providing different ways for students to respond to concepts. I think if teachers of those students understand the idea of how, I believe Google, I know Microsoft Word has, but basically tools that have speech to text.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're requiring students to respond verbally to things, but that child may not be able to, or they may be able to auto dictate. So some sort of software that allows students to do that, as well as, it is slipping my mind, but Erin, you may know it off the top. It's not Microsoft Translate. I should have typed this out. I'm on the spot for this one, but it's a resource that will read text to you, and most Microsoft tools have it. The name is going to pop up soon. Immersive Reader. So realizing tools such as I think Nearpod has it, Flipgrid has it. Not all, majority of Microsoft tools has it, to where if text is provided somewhere, you enact the Immersive Reader and it will read the text. And within that free tool, it's a free tool, it actually allows the speed of the text to either be read fast or slowly. It has hundreds of languages that it can be adapted to as well. It will highlight the words. It will change the different color patterns of the page, depending on if there's visual impairments there. So I think any tool there are a variety of tools that do speech to text, but Immersive Reader is very good for actually reading text out loud to students. So though I can't speak to accommodations, to kind of go back to what I mentioned in the beginning, as far as what's happened in schools, I've seen it up to the districts to provide some of their services that they already use for school with special ed students. They have those students come in physically to the building. So if they found that the exceptionality was of a certain variation, that the student will be best served in person or face-to-face, they've had those students come back in, and others work virtually. But tying into our conversation this evening, those teachers are having a challenging time learning different tools and how to accommodate that to the babies that they teach. So there's a heavy transition with that group of teachers.
But you know what I heard from you is basically think about the tools you do have in the programs that you are using and maybe are familiar with, and dig a little bit deeper or ask for help to see if there are tools in there you don't realize you could be using. Because Microsoft Word lately, I've been noticing so many new things on there that I didn't realize that are so helpful. And one of them is the translation tool, because a lot of stuff that I do tends to have to go out across the district. And I lately have been doing translations for other languages, because we have a lot of areas in our community where we do have a language barrier, and it's been almost spot on with the translation. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
And there's one more resource that is a Google Chrome extension called Snap and Read. And Snap and Read works similarly to Immersive Reader as far as it reading text that's on web pages and websites for students. So I think so. So Erin, I'm glad you actually pulled that point out, in that it really is taking what's available to you or what you're familiar with. The same conversations with teachers who teach general ed students, and just adapting it to the needs of those students.
Do you guys see Legally Blonde?
Yes.
Yes.
I
The
love
snap. When you said snap,
Bend and
I
snap.
envisioned Reese Witherspoon.
So you talked about overcoming those accessibility issues, or the issues for accessibility, but what about the student who doesn't have the accessibility issues, but they have the access issues? What kind of tips or advice would you give for helping those students out?
So first, I hope there's been some sort of conversation to what is available. I think that's the first point of contact. If there's an environment where a student, our district school that does not have devices, have they been put in contact with companies or entities that can provide them with those resources? For instance, on a teacher's note, a lot of our teachers who are doing virtual learning, there is, and I should have pulled this up, there's a grant that is currently out to where if they apply for it, I literally think it's just fill out the information, they will mail you a separate monitor to put in your classroom so that you can, so imagine Microsoft Teams, a Teams call or a Google Meet call, and you want to, a lot of teachers want to see the panel with all of their kids, but they have to teach their lesson as well. So it's a lot of shifting of screens and it's a lot of trouble. So what if they're able to put their kids on one screen, project to their smartboard and have their Nearpod or PowerPoint, whatever it is, on one screen? So that company, and I can share this link later because I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can find it. There's a resource for that for teachers. So going back to kids, if they have not been informed of those opportunities, hopefully their school is providing accommodations in the form of, to be honest, kicking it old school. Are they able to print out that content for the kids? Are they offering hours, opportunities, are safe spaces, pandemic-wise, set some sort of a safe space for students to receive that information and that content and to submit it? I'll even speak to the beginning of the pandemic last year. In one of the environments that I support, they didn't quickly turn to the technology. They said, okay, let's just drop everything. We're going to print off millions and millions of pieces of paper. Now, I'm not saying that a school needs to do all of this for everybody, but to those scholars and those families that don't have that access, I think printing off is fine and giving space to complete it. Maybe kicking it old school again. Can you talk to Mr. Borders for 10 minutes on the phone on how to explain this concept? And on 2 to 3 days later, can you turn this back in and get it that way? So if it's a thing of you having absolutely no access to technology, Wi-Fi, there's no library around, or not a safe, a COVID safe space that you can go to work independently, then I think traditional paper and pencil is okay.
I really hope, we've said this before, that when we continue to lurch out of this and we head into the summer months in particular, that everybody just isn't so quick to drop their packs and run,
Yes.
Run into summer mode. I'm hoping that we really do hold ourselves back and we have some serious focused conversations right out of the gate while it's fresh, and we capture as much as we can. Cause I'm afraid that people are going to say, oh, we're going to be fine in the fall. And, we have COVID going through my home right now, but it's one of those things where I don't know how long we're going to be in this. And I think that we have to continue to, and I hope we never return to it, but we may, and we need to be better prepared. We just need to do a better job. Yeah, definitely.
Ultimately, I feel what I've noticed is that across the board, depending on a very affluent environment or affluent family or a family that has a different socioeconomic status, at the core of that, they know that that child has to have access to something. Whether it's been an old device that's been sitting in the corner, you can just so happen to get it on, and you go. I've seen parents take their kids to the school parking lot and sit there for 30 minutes because they know that there's Wi-Fi that's going into the parking lot to have them submit something. So I've seen a lot of people make do, but I think at the foundational piece, we now know that it's becoming more prevalent to understand that that textbook and that workbook is not the end all be all of teaching.
I think that you mentioned the 2 screens. I don't know if this is it or not, but 2screensforteachers.org. It looks like it's a organization that's accepting donations for monitors and then also sending them out for free so that teachers can have 2. That's pretty exactly cool. So that's a great resource. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I really have enjoyed this conversation. I feel like it's been very fruitful. I've written a bunch of things down. And so Marcus, we get to this time at the end where we like to have some takeaways, some things that maybe we kind of grasped from the conversation that we could kind of share out as actionable items. So 4 of us will go first, but then maybe at the end, we'll leave you with a few last words of some thoughts or action items as well. Does that sound like a great idea?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyone ready to go first? Okay, I'll go first. 2 things. One, I wrote down, we need to be willing to meet our students in the 21st century. I mean, as best as we can, right? As best as we can, because these people that are in school right now, they're going off into jobs of now and the future, and it's going to continue to be different and evolving. So we've got to try to do our best to try to meet them so that they're prepared for whatever path they set off after graduation. The other one is, Pete, I'm starting to think our storefront, we need to make a shirt with like the Prince song, but instead of party like it's 1985, it says teaching like it's 1985.
Yeah.
I cannot with you.
You're welcome.
I love it.
All right, who's next?
Don't be afraid of technology. I'm sorry, I'm being silly. But no, that was my takeaway. It really helped me not to be afraid, to ask for help, and really creating a community, even if you don't have a widespread culture and climate in your building, but create your own community of help. I love what you said, Erin, about, there are a lot of free things out there. If you see a struggling colleague, share. I think collaborating, communicating, and really just encouraging each other, whether it's technology or anything, it's the key. So that's my big takeaway.
And I always tell people, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? What is the worst case scenarios? So you don't get to do that part of the lesson, or, hopefully your computer's not going to blow up. What's the worst case scenario? It's really not that serious. Just
Ironically,
try.
I always tell teachers in trainings, I said, if I'm modeling a new tool or revisiting something, I say, click around. I said, unless you see a big red button that says this device will self-destruct, most likely you can. No, I've been using that for years because that is how I learn. And I try not to put myself on or have teachers put, well, Marcus, you're this and you're that. No, the way that I did what I did in my classroom was by asking questions and Googling. The same Googling you have that's all that I did. And trial and error. So I'm glad you brought that up, Erin, because I say click away, unless be careful with the cloud services. If it says delete forever, be mindful. But when it comes to learning something and how it works, just try it out.
That approach, your approach, that ties into my little takeaway. I wish there were more trainers like you.
Yes.
Because I was in one this week, and what a mental root canal. I felt so resentful that time and energy has never been more important and more valuable right now. And to rake teachers over the coals right now with some of this stuff, and somebody's trying to win you over, impress you, show as much as possible on this new hot thing in the shortest amount of time and just shove it down your throat. And, and I love that you brought up the questions that you said, I'm aware of what teachers are asking during these. You said, are you wasting my time with fluff? Are you going to overwhelm me? Or are you sharing something that will help me, something relevant? Are you sharing something that's going to help me be the best that I can be? Help me, teaching a tool. And I think that's important. Culture and climate matters. And we need more trainers like you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto. I will never go last when we do this ever again, because you stole all of my
Usually
points.
Goes first.
I always give it to you easy, Fred. You learned.
I couldn't unmute my mic.
Just click around.
Right.
Click around.
I think that actually that is my main takeaway, and it's like a great reminder, and that is that when you are learning software is not something you could experience in one sitting and then expect to master it. You have to sit and you have to play with it and you have to use it, and you have to use it repetitively. It's a skill. It requires memory or I was going to say memory management, but I was going to say, having that ability for recall is only going to be obtained by using it over and over again. So
Yes.
you have to be in there playing it. Teachers need to be, I think most are aware of that, but yet they don't give it the time that it needs. And then that puts them in another place when they're in front of the students and they begin to fail. They have to be ready to share that failure with the class and then turn that into a learning, a teaching moment, a learning moment, whatever it may be for everybody.
Absolutely.
That's key. And I just want to say, Marcus, I always love meeting people like you because it brings hope and it's so cool. So I have a military background. And when I see someone like you stepping up into the education ranks for your own education, getting ready to get back out on the front line again eventually, right? It's motivating. It shows that our system is working.
Yes.
And I think having you out there is going to help bolster the ranks, and we're gonna do fine. And as long as we have people like you coming and stepping back up into the ranks, that's good stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's beautiful.
I appreciate that.
So
Is it my turn?
It's your turn, sir. Yes.
So I think mine, it shares a bit of what everybody has said, but it kind of ties up the conversation. I believe it was at the beginning of this school year, I made a blanket statement across my social media platforms whenever I spoke with teachers, because August and September were very challenging months for me as far as personally and work-wise, and they kind of all clashed together. Give yourself, your students, and your parents grace. Even though we've been doing this for a second now, we still need to give ourselves space to whatever that means for us. Give yourselves grace. The next one is just be engaging, acknowledge those challenges, but don't harp on them. So the next one is realizing a lot of what's happening with technology is effective 21st century teaching. So again, my blunt statement, stop fighting it. Think about career choices, or just think, do you need to step your practices up, or is it time for something else? So that you can not waste your time and not hinder the education process for students. We've talked about this throughout this conversation this evening, but the next one is fail with your students. Stop trying to model perfection, because that encourages them, whether it may have nothing to do with technology, but if you're a math teacher and it's time for them to showcase how they solved a problem and they don't get it right, they can address their errors in that problem versus feeling bad about getting it wrong. And lastly, research. Aaron, we talked about this, research yourself and have your students help you. So be invested in learning and not researching in a pedagogical sense, just a quick Google. Mm-hmm. I also tell teachers, you will learn how to do your hair, sew a shirt, cook a meal. You will go to YouTube to find that, but you will not go to YouTube to figure out how to log into insert tool. So get into that habit of doing those small things, researching yourself, and teach your kids and have them do it for you at the end. So those are my takeaways.
Nice.
That's solid advice. Marcus, if it's okay with you, is there some place that you can kind of tell us where our listeners can find you if they would like to reach out to you or follow you?
Absolutely. So the main place and the easiest place to contact me is at my Twitter. It is at Team Borders, TeamBorders, and that is on Twitter. And I'm in the process. It is active, so I won't downplay it too much, but I have a website, mbedtech.org.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this. And like we were talking about earlier, your voice, it's like
We're
butter.
rocking again.
It's like butter.
It's the quiet storm.
No. Thanks for being here today.
Do you ever need backup for anything? I'm you can sing.
Yeah, we're doing the Barry White musical. And we'd love to have you. So that's great. And Marcus, I'm reaching out. I wrote to Kennesaw's department, broadcasting and media department, asking for some help. If you know anybody over there, let me know. They haven't written me back yet.
Well, you can get into to that if there's anything and this is to the listeners. I'll provide you guys with those resources that I mentioned a while back. But I support a fantastic team of coaches. So if anyone needs to look up for it, let's just say their district or school doesn't have support, but they want some sort of coaching support. I'll do a little shameless plug. The KSU I Teach team. So if you literally look up I think it's, let me give you the correct link. Teach, I believe we are, if you Google Kennesaw State University, I Teach will come right up. And we are actually there online to provide on-demand support in that.
Wow.
And it goes deeper as well.
Awesome.
We have maker bus activities. We get into the coding aspects of things, and we provide coaching within districts and schools. So,
And if that doesn't work, bring back the paperclip, guys. I'm telling you.
yes.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much, Marcus.
I've had fun with you
Appreciate
guys. Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
was great. Thank you for your
Absolutely.
time and your evening.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thanks, Carl.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was awesome.
Bye-bye.